the biggest threats to our democracy that we've seen, right? I think like in the last 4 years, we've seen a lot happen in terms of legislation and bills and a bunch of things that have happened. And we as social workers have a mission to always advocate for, and we're pretty much pioneers of social justice, and we have definitely seen threats to our democracy. So we just want to talk a little bit about what those threats that we have seen are. Oh, she says, it seems the broadcast stopped for a second. It should resume in a bit. I
Oh,
think we're live though.
is it just us two?
Yeah, I think it's back. Okay. All right, great. So we were discussing the threats to democracy and what we've seen and some of the things that okay, we're here. Great, great. Some of the things that we discussed yesterday were gerrymandering, the disenfranchisement of voters' rights of formerly incarcerated individuals, voter suppression. If anyone wants to chime in the chat of what were some threats that you've seen to democracy, to our democracy recently, that would be awesome to hear from some of you here.
It would be. And Monica, you're so right. And we're seeing just a litany of really harmful proposed and some passed legislation in a number of states post the 2020 election, like this legislative session. And there are numerous bills centered around what many are defining as voter suppression, and that is like limiting voters' access to the ballot through, putting restrictions on absentee and mail-in ballots, or um, there's all kinds of things. And then also in many states, there's also redistricting happening this legislative session this year. There's been a ton of pushback against that too, though. In many states, there are a lot of representatives proposing bills to expand voting rights. And of course, at the federal level, we've seen HR 1, but that's also happening in state levels where legislatures pushed to expand voting rights during the pandemic. And then now they're saying, well, we need to keep these rights. Like we had the highest voter turnout, in 100 years. We need to make sure that we can do this again.
Right. And some of the things that we're seeing here in the chat, we have some great things going on. A great conversation here. It says voter purges, voter ID laws, Citizens United, and the flooding of corporate money into politics, shutting down of polling locations. And, how about those 4-hour long lines to vote?
Right. It's
We
ridiculous.
saw that everywhere
Mhm.
recently, right? Like people literally having to spend their entire day online, and by the time they get to the front, now they can no longer vote, which by the
Right.
way is illegal. But we saw this happening. Someone says modern day poll tax for felons in Florida.
Yeah.
Modern day poll tax for felons in Florida. Iowa passing a measure that inhibits voting. Georgia trying to end early voting on Sundays. Yep.
Right. Which is crazy. Yeah. Um, and so it's important to realize the historical context of this too. So like there's a chronic disinvestment in election administration in our country. So election administration is in each county, you have a government organization that's in charge of administering elections, right? Um, they run the polling places that you go and vote. They pay the people who are at those polling places, and they pay the people who count your votes, right? Um, so in addition to all of these like very tangible acts of voter suppression, there's also a chronic disinvestment in those organizations. So my opinion, I believe we need to be advocating for more money and for more accountability of the spending of that money in our election administration, so that our election administrators aren't working with no budget to pull off an election, right? So that we can have more poll workers, we can have shorter lines, and of course, in addition to that, we need to be advocating for uh, greater access to the polls and less voter suppression.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see some other great things in the chat here of the gutting of government agencies in response to reform,
Yeah.
times at poll locations that we just spoke about, not being long enough or accounting for the fact that people work late, new bill. So, and let's not even get into people who had to work and their jobs not allowing them to leave, even though they're entitled to leave to vote. So
Hmm.
some people are literally missing out on the opportunity to even exercise their right to vote because some employers are trying to oppress them and take that right away from them.
Hmm. So the Brennan Center for Justice and an organization like Demos, there's a lot of really great ideas for how to like push back on those things, especially for working voters. Stuff like online voting or same day voter registration. There's automatic voter registration that's going really well out on the West Coast. So there are policies that we can pass to prevent that, so that if uh, you work normal hours, you can still go to the poll and vote. Um, but we're seeing just incredible pushback in many state legislatures preventing that from happening.
Absolutely. I also see here new bill not allowing to give food or water to those in line to vote. This is the second age of Jim Crow. We see here I worked day in and day out to ensure my community was registered and ready to vote. Voter suppression is un-American. And we see here not making election day a holiday so people would have it off and have time to vote. That's a really Nina said that. I think that's a really good comment there.
Hmm.
We have days like Christopher Columbus Day off as a federal holiday, but
But not election day, right?
not election day. So those who can't take off or their jobs don't allow them to have an hour to go vote, they can't. And like obviously as we've seen, sometimes you need literally hours to stay online to vote.
Right.
I see here not making election day a holiday. Elected officials in 43 states have introduced more than 250 bills to make it harder for Americans to vote, many of whom already experience voter suppression. Absolutely. Oh, so Nina says I am from Puerto Rico and here it is a day off.
Wow. Way to go.
Voters voting day.
I had
Wow.
no clue. Thanks, Nina.
Yes, and obviously we've seen this all as a tax to our democracy, right? They want to keep us away from these polls.
Let's talk about Nelly or Neely's comment about uh, it's an attack on democracy showcased in the underrepresentation of minorities in the political arena and in the allocation of resources to these communities. So it is well established in the voting literature that um, if you look at the economic distribution, those on the latter end in those communities have less access to government representation, and also they vote at lower rates, and they're less civically engaged. So through a critical lens, we can see that as voter suppression, where um, marginalized and oppressed communities that are economically marginalized and oppressed, which is undoubtedly in our country um, correlated with low-income communities of color, are experiencing voter suppression because of our economic system, where the research shows that if you live in a low-income community, you're less likely to go to the poll and vote, right? So Nelly, you're bringing up a really great point that it's an attack on democracy just to have that phenomenon in our country.
Yeah, and Nelly is really highlighting the fact that there is an underrepresentation of minorities in the political arena. That is people like color. There are not many people in politics that look like me, and that's just the truth of the matter. And so, one of the things we were discussing in yesterday's panel, that someone posed a question in the chat, and if you remember, they said, it was something along the lines of we as young people can influence other young leaders, right? How do we do that? How do
Wow.
we do that? Because I myself, let's say I'm inspired and moved by people like AOC,
Mm.
Ayanna Presley, right? Tory Bush, because you know there is an underrepresentation of people who represent the working class.
Right. Well, let me give you a case study of my work in Ferguson. Mary Ella Jones, in the 120 years that Ferguson has been incorporated as a city, they have never had a black mayor. They've never had a woman who's a mayor. Um,
Mm,
Despite that 80%, roughly 80% of the community is black.
mm,
Um, it's like if you just drive through the city, it's like you can see voter suppression just um, like in the streets. It's crazy just how evident it is there. But Mayor Jones is the first black and the first woman mayor of Ferguson,
mm.
and we had to fight so hard to make that happen. She actually lost her first race to a white guy. Um, but Mayor Jones being in that position is has been incredible for the community. And what we've done is, in the process of her being elected, we've built a um, grassroots and community organization um, where the community has a direct ear to the mayor. But in the process of that, we have young people of color who see Mayor Jones in her position. They have direct access to Mayor Jones, and it's an inspiration. And it's also
Right.
creating a pipeline for them to be involved with the political process. Um, so my point is, as social workers, we can uh, either run for office or we can do those things I just said to increase representation in public office. In the meantime, creating pipelines for young people of color to get to those positions too.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you bring up great points. You bring up really good points. In what's your back? Oh, someone actually wants to know what's your background. Are you in Ferguson?
Yeah, I served as the mayor's director of data and strategy for her election or for her campaign, and then now I'm a policy advisor. I'm her communications director for a community task force we've created, which is a regional community task force. It's basically how the mayor is um, accomplishing economic and social development in Ferguson now. Hey, Joe Roeder, congrats. That's incredible.
I'm doing practical. I'm at the city of Ferguson. I'm also very excited to work with Mayor Jones. Also good to see you, Taylor. Yeah, and Bianca says I agree. Run for office and or organize, and so that's why I find so much value in organizations like CRISP, and the platform it provides for us social workers who are either interested in running or organizing, right, or just being involved in the actual change because it's going to happen with or without us. So are we going to stand on the sidelines and watch it happen and let other people do it? Or are we going to be involved by either supporting others or
Hmm.
being the ones to run?
Exactly.
Someone says, I'm from Oklahoma, and I think that one of the many issues here is that we do a great job about keeping citizens ignorant, though an insane lack of funding for our school system, the continued push towards incarceration rather than rehabilitation, excellent point, and limited funding for social services to help people out of poverty. Our system and our culture makes it so we blindly follow the majority rather than doing the research. It keeps people from voting for their best interests. That's a great point, Morgan. Morgan, that is a great point you make there.
Hmm.
I'm just reading in the chat, trying to.
Morgan, you should come join us
Yes,
and talk
Morgan,
about.
come on up, Morgan. It seems like you have a lot to share. Do you want to join us, Morgan? Because you brought up some great points here. You brought up keeping citizens ignorant enough. Sorry, keeping citizens ignorant though through though an insane lack of funding for our school system, so lack of funding for our school systems, right? You bring up a point of the continued push towards incarceration rather than rehabilitation. We've seen mass incarceration disproportionately affecting communities of color.
Mm-hmm.
And you also are talking about the limited funding for social services to help people out of poverty. You bring up a lot of great points here. Oh, Morgan said okay. Morgan's going to join us up here. I definitely want to continue that conversation.
Definitely. Well, we can wait till then, but there's so many layers there of like the connections between like where we work and what we do as social workers, and social policy and in social services, and how that connects with um, civic and political engagement. And I really speak to that.
Hi, Morgan.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Where are you tuning in from?
Oklahoma. I'm in Oklahoma City.
All right, you did mention that. I'm sorry. And you said that you're an MSW student. Where are you right now in school?
Sorry, there's a lot of like feedback going on, and I can't really focus.
I was saying, it says that you're an MSW student. I was wondering, where are you in school right now?
Sorry. Oh, I go to the University of Oklahoma. I'm advanced standing, so hopefully I'll be done by August.
Okay, so everyone's muted now. You can probably hear me better now. There's probably no feedback. So I just wanted to unpack some of the things that you mentioned in the chat. I think you bring up a lot of great points, and they're all intersectional, right? They're all definitely intersectional, and I just wanted you, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about the continued push towards incarceration rather than rehabilitation. I think that this is a very, very important point, because as we see, people who are incarcerated and then once they leave, their voters' rights are taken from them, right? And so we see people of color disproportionately affected and disproportionately incarcerated. So it's it's all strategic, right? To have these people not voting in elections where their votes can make a difference, right? So I wanted to know if you wanted to unpack that a little more and tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I'm not super knowledgeable about like the whole thing about it, especially relating to like minority communities, because in Oklahoma, we are a incredibly white population. Obviously there are still going to be those minority communities are going to have a much harder time, um, just because of the systemic racism that we face in this country. Um, but Oklahoma does have I don't know if it still does, but at one point we had the highest incarceration rate in the world for men, women, and children, which was just insane to me. We also have like one of the worst funding for our school systems. A couple years back, we had a teacher walkout for weeks, where teachers would just come to the Capitol and request higher pay because the teachers are having all over the country to pay for their own supplies. I remember being in high school and my textbooks didn't even have like the cover because they couldn't afford new textbooks. There were pages ripped out. Like the whole point of the system in Oklahoma and the culture around it is to keep people um, from learning more and figuring out like, oh, this law that just came up recently, it was state question 805, specifically designed to sorry, my brain's a little fuzzy, specifically designed to reduce sentence enhancements so that people that had previously been in the criminal justice system wouldn't face more repercussions and get added time because of their previous history. And we voted that down because people were saying that it would allow domestic violence perpetrators to not have those sentence enhancements, but they weren't actually looking at those laws and looking at how it would impact. And they weren't looking at the way that domestic violence is set up in our uh, in our state, and how they had just made a new law that would make that domestic violence charge a felony rather than a misdemeanor or a violent crime, sorry, rather than um, nonviolent. So they restricted it in order to get it to pass, but Oklahomans were just still not willing to go the extra mile to look into it and actually read because they've just been told by Imhoff or Langford that this is what's best for you. You have to listen to us because we're Republicans and we know how Oklahoma's works. We were so close to having one blue county in the entire state, but for the past, I don't know how long, I want to say like 30 years, Oklahoma has been an entirely red state. Sorry, that was a lot.
No. Thank you for sharing. And I do just want to read a comment that was just put in the chat. And it says, and Selena, I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I don't know if you want to join us up here, but it says, although I agree that the system is designed to fail the working class and people of color, I want to push back a bit. We have to address the fact that mass incarceration was created to maintain slavery and permanently disenfranchise pool of citizenry. Many of the people imprisoned are actually innocent, but have been pushed into plea deals for crimes they haven't committed because of all the money involved in hiring lawyers to help them navigate the system. And I think we also need to address the way these systems work. We can't talk about our political systems without talking about capitalism and orgs like the DNC and RNC. Even when we have populist leaders like Bernie Sanders, they are often shut out. And I think Selena, you bring up a lot of great points here.
Monica, we addressed it a little bit yesterday in our panel, and I just want to go back to Demos's definition of economic democracy, and it's based on this linking of our political systems and our economic systems. Selena, please join us. That'd be great.
Yes, please. And Morgan, you can feel free if you want to stay. You can stay. If not, you can go back to an attendee view, however you feel comfortable.
Short point. You can't have like political equity without economic equity. So Demos is saying we need to center Black and Brown communities economically before we can even think about fixing or having a healthier democracy, right? But I hope Selena can join us and talk more about that.
Yeah, and I think one of the a really important point that Selena brought up was that many of these people are imprisoned. That one of the people who are imprisoned are actually innocent. And we just had a session. I dropped in one of the sessions here, and there was great conversation surrounding bail, right? Bail money. And one of the points that was brought up was that many people of color can't afford to post bail for something that their white counterpart probably could, right? And so one of the students had mentioned a point and said, "Hi, Max." And one of the students mentioned a point and said, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank here, but many of these people, due to living in poverty, are basically forced into incarceration. They don't have the access to the resources such as a good lawyer, posting bail. They just don't have that access and that privilege. So you see people disproportionately affected because they don't have the access to the resources and the money that is required of navigating this capitalist system. So, Selena, I don't know if you want to chime in, or Max, thank you for joining us. I don't know if you want to share where you're tuning in from, but it's good to have you here.
Hi, can y'all hear me okay? So my name is Selena Fernandez Ayala. My pronouns are they, them, but if you speak Spanish, I will also accept ella. I am a first year MSW student at UConn, and I'm tuning in from New Haven, Connecticut, my hometown. And I think, I think it's just so important that we talk about, again, like how the systems like fail us. And while I agree that there are tools that we have not been provided in order to make informed decisions. I think it's also so important to talk about factors, like I said, like capitalism, like how these systems are designed to really hurt. Even though I am light skin, I identify firmly as a person of color. And again, one of the factors is we also have to give our communities credit where they're due, because so many people already understand that the police aren't here. For example, many people feel the police aren't here to help us, they're here to protect property. And so we also need to honor the knowledge that's already on the streets, because when we start saying things like, oh, people are kept ignorant, because of and they just blindly follow the majority, we're also really denying people's agency. We also deny the way that people get their knowledge from their streets and their lived experiences. So I think it's so important that, yes, there is a lot of forced ignorance upon us, but we also have to engage people where they're at, because there is so much that we can learn from the communities, as opposed to, and part of the issue that we have to talk about is hierarchy. Because if we keep on saying, oh, we need to take this knowledge from above, from our ivory towers, from our capitals, and bring them to the community, that's inherently hierarchical, and that's not going to create a lot of change. We need to work within our communities to see what knowledge can they bring us. Like yesterday, I was working on a bilingual webinar, and I learned that when you use the word webinar in Spanish, webinario, that's very like intimidating and academic. So you can use more accessible words like taller, workshop, that can really get people in. And that's an example that doesn't exactly relate to legislation, but it's just an example. Like, there is so much richness on the ground that if we keep thinking that the masses are ignorant, that's part of the problem. That's how we're going to keep getting organizations like the DNC and the RNC, when we just allow ourselves to think that our communities don't know what's going on, because they do. And who else can better know what's going on than the people that are most disenfranchised by the system? But that's enough for me right now. I do want to give a chance for others to speak, but I think it is just important to consider how we talk about our communities.
That was a great point, Selena. Thank you for challenging me, because I love this kind of discussion.
Selena, I just want to build on what you're saying, because I think that social work can play an integral role in what you're saying, because like many of us are trained in grassroots community organizing, right? Some of the most effective political campaigns and social movements that I've seen and been a part of are exactly what you're talking about. Like, look at Stacey Abrams in Georgia. Like, they built a grassroots community organization of communities, people who know what's going on in their communities, and that is being used to one, increase voter engagement, but two, change the perspective of people who are being elected to power. So thank you for sharing that.
I guess I can introduce myself. Yeah, my name is Max Pierce, MSW student at the University of Kansas. So I'm calling in from Lawrence. I really liked what you said, Selena, and totally agree. Like, we're behooved by our ethical standards to be client-centered and focused, and they have the most intimate knowledge of the suffering that society has to offer, and is a good source of knowledge there. So the reason I hopped on, I feel like in this space there's probably a lot of overlap and agreements about what policy changes need to happen to increase ease of access to voting. Maybe with some like minor disagreements on like how it's implemented or something. But what I'm curious or concerned about is, the way I understand it is, due to the flooding of like corporate money in politics right now, we have a lot of elected officials who are, it's not like they're unwise and they're motivated to create ease of access. They are like maliciously motivated to, keep it limited, because like corporate interests don't align with increased representation of the masses and ease of access to voting. So I'm just curious, like, how do we as social workers take that into consideration and navigate that it isn't like about educating these people and then like, oh, okay, I'm bought in. It's more like they have malicious intent to have voting lines be hours long and voter ID laws and, you know, the inability to give someone food or water in line and things like that. Just how we would navigate that as political social workers.
I would need to take a look at the exact legislation, but you know, there can be loopholes. Like I know, like at least in Connecticut, I think it's a federal thing though that there's not supposed to be like any kind of like propaganda like 75 feet in front of like a polling location. Maybe that's where we hand out food and water before people go in. I think definitely again I'd have to take a look at that, but seeing what we can do, so maybe if I'm not allowed to give things to people in line, hand them in on their hand them in as they go into their polling locations.
Monica, I think you have plenty to say on this too. So before you go, I'll jump in. You bring up amazing points, and personally, I've seen that in the government offices. Some of the government offices I've worked in, like, seen exactly what you're talking about. Like, it's not like you're just making it up, right? It's real. And HR 1, of course, it's federal legislation, addresses that somewhat with ethics and government regulations for like campaign finance. So that's a federal solution to it. But generally, just in my experience, I'm pretty pessimistic about like what we can do about this, because it's been going on for so long. There's been so many movements to try to stop it. We do have HR 1, but HR 1 would have to pass to do that. Like some other solutions are publicly funded elections. That's a great idea too. You can put more stringent caps on campaign donations. Even with that, like Selena said, there's so many loopholes around that. Like you can donate. There's a cap on how much you can donate to, say, the RNC or the DNC, but you can donate as much as you want to certain PACs. Like there's a million loopholes around this stuff. So my 2 points, Monica, I hope you or someone else can make me feel more positive about it. But we need structural reform to our political and economic systems, like we've been saying, maybe through HR 1. I think that would be a great solution to it. Can someone please help me feel better about this? Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know.
No, Taylor. I'm following you. Selena, you bring up great points. And Max, you pose a great question. I really think we need more social workers in office. We are the people that need to be at the table when policies and legislation that is directly affecting our people is being discussed, debated on, funded, and created. And I think there's a lot of power in that. And of course, running for office is very strategic, right? Because if I am in, let's say, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, I may not win, right? It's very strategic where they place candidates to actually win. But I really do think there is power in there is power, like Chris, we say, unleashing the power of social work on the Hill. I really do think there is power in us being in these elected positions where we are, calling the shots. I really do think so. I think that, there's a lot of organization and there's a lot of grassroots organizing and a lot of work that needs to be done in the communities, but we also need the support from those officials who are running. And so, yes, I see more social workers in office, power in numbers. And so one of the questions I posed yesterday in the panel was, what role do we think we can play as social workers in, well, I don't want to say preserving our democracy, but in our democracy, right? What role can we play for our people? Are we going to be on the sidelines and watch these individuals continue to create laws and policies that are directly affecting our people and continuously oppressing our people? Or are we going to be the ones that are running? And then when we run, who are we put, like I said yesterday, we have to lift as we climb, right? So then let's say, Taylor, you run and you win. Now, who are you choosing on your board? Who's your staff? I think there's power in like-minded individuals, because for the most part we have similar agendas, but we really need to be more civically engaged, and that can look differently for everybody. I think everyone's work is extremely important in the field. I really do. But when I think about like the question that Max poses, like where do we start when we're literally watching this and it's hard to watch, right? I really think that we need more social workers in elected positions, whether it be in city council, the state legislature, Congress, the Senate. I hope, I've seen the first Black president in my lifetime. I've seen the first female vice president in my lifetime. I'm hopeful that I'm going to see, and we have pioneers in Congress, right? Social workers. I'm really hopeful that I'm going to continue to see social workers be more politically engaged. And I think that is a huge part towards making the strides that we need to see and our communities need. So that's my thoughts on that. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in.
One thing that you said that kind of I want to challenge you on a little bit is we want to have like-minded people in these spaces, and you're exactly right. We do, but I think it's also important to have the other side in these spaces too. Like if I were to run for political office and win, I would still want to have someone on the exact opposite side so that I can say, how do I reach your people? How do I meet with you and find this kind of compromise where we can come together and support my side and your side and kind of get in agreement with how can we progress as a team rather than just like my side versus your side, because for so long this political discourse and this separation has caused what we've seen with the Trump administration. We have now these very two distinct sides. How do we bridge that? And that's what I think that's one of the most important things that we can do in social work at this point, is just try and bridge that gap between what we want and what the other side wants.
Although I do believe there is importance in having more social workers in office, my concentration right now is in community organizing, and I did that very deliberately, but there has to be more than just social workers in office, because don't forget that Arizona Senator Kristen Sinema did her famous thumbs down vote for the minimum wage, and she's a social worker. So I don't think that's the solution in of itself, because the danger with getting involved with existing systems is that you become assimilated to those systems and you are streamlined into those systems. So I don't think that we are the answer enough. What I do think though, and I think that that social workers should be doing, is actually encouraging people from disenfranchised backgrounds, so people of color, low income people, to run for office, and then providing those resources. Again, there's always the danger of becoming assimilated into the system, but because social workers, we inherently come from a place of power through our education, through our knowledge, through our degrees. I think the tool is, we need to be more tools for our community, so that we can uplift those voices instead of always inserting ourselves into these settings.
And I do agree with you, Selena. I think you bring up really great points, but I do think both are important, because I'm not saying all social workers have the same agenda. I definitely want to make that clear, but I think both are extremely important. It's almost like, it's not like there's not like a fine line. Like they're very, I think both are extremely important. I really do think I see some more people want to join us on camera. Unfortunately, we only have five people can be backstage on at a time. So I apologize about that.
I can jump off and to make room for someone else. I don't have a problem with that.
No, it's
yeah. I want to give people an opportunity to talk to.
Sure. But I do think, Celine, I thank you both for
Yeah, thank you.
for joining us. Bye. So let's see if we can get.
Monica, I'm so glad it wasn't just us two, although you're wonderful to talk to.
Yes, no, we need to engage more people. I just wish that this could be like open with everyone's faces and everyone can unmute at any time, because sometimes it's hard to keep up in the chat to read everything. I'm really trying to read everyone's points. But no, I do think that Selena does make a great point, because one of the things that Jean-Louis mentioned in the panel yesterday was, Jean-Louis said, who better to run for these positions than those who have those lived experiences, right? Like the actual stakeholders. And so I do think that is extremely important, empowering individuals who are living in these experiences to run for office,
Right.
and supporting them. And I also do think it is important for people like us to be running for office and being in these spaces and grassroots organizing. So I do think they're both extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the panel from yesterday, well, there were two panels. One was the seasoned folks, like I call them, and the other one was the young social workers and young social work professionals. They are both recorded. I'm going to see if I can pull up the link to drop it in the chat. Thank you, Nicole. I just saw your comment, your nice comment. I'm going to try and pull up the conversation from yesterday. And so I don't know if anyone wants to join us and continue that conversation, or if I should pose another question, because I saw a few people saying they want to join us.
It looks like they sent a link.
Oh, Notion sent the link.
In the Notion, or Vincent also sent a link to, looks like Roderick to join us.
Roderick, okay.
I think they wanted to talk about our party system and how parties are created.
Sure.
I think.
Hey.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah.
If you have the tab open of the attendee view, you have to close that out to be able to hear us well from the back.
Okay, yeah, I closed it. I think it takes a little bit of time for it to speed to kind of.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll wait until that happens.
Sure. Can you hear us well?
Huh?
Can you hear us well, or do you still?
No, it's jumping. The audio is kind of jumping.
Okay.
Sporadically.
Okay.
Can you guys
well,
hear me?
We can hear you well.
Okay, awesome. Well, I mean, I'll just kind of just chime in here to the conversation that you guys had earlier about where social workers fit in this big scheme of politics. I think also integrating people with different backgrounds professionally. I'm 8 years into like a marketing career, and I just switched over to doing to pursue my MSW, and I differ from a lot of my contemporaries in my program mainly because my perspective from my career just has me looking at things differently. Like say for instance, with the rise of like, somebody like Donald Trump, those campaigns typically they get traction and they have the propensity to change the political arena, but they gain traction based off of the social climate. Like he tapped into almost this whole almost like polar, like almost the same as like how Hitler came to power. There was a struggle within a homogeneous population, and then he tapped into that. There was middle America who was feeling like they were unheard, and what people like this tend to do is they're able to tap into that and then and take over that political arena and then pull those votes in, and those people, us as social workers, if we can kind of come into that in an interdisciplinary way and understand how these things or how these people come to power, that's just another way that we can kind of analyze or impact the ground floor, the grassroots ahead of time, not 4 years later trying to clean it up like we're trying to do now.
How do you pronounce your name? I don't want to mispronounce your name.
It's Roderick. You're still kind of crackling, but I'm trying to hear the best I can.
You're following me? Okay, Roderick. I think you bring up really great points, and I do want to just ask. I want to pose a question to you because you worked in a totally different field for 8 years and then you came into social work. So, you know, you have different perspectives, right? Because it is true. Sometimes our perspective, I mean, although we're all different in our thoughts, it's different when you have worked in a different field for a long time. So my question to you is, what unique skills do you think social workers bring to the table in political spaces as opposed to our counterparts who don't have a social work background?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I do is I understand, take Trump, I understand how he won. You know, I work in the e-commerce space, in the digital space. So what Trump did was he tapped in strategically in a marketing way. If you ever look at the studies, Trump was able to win and gain traction the way he was through digital campaigning, through misinformation, and that's also dealing with, you know, voter suppression as well. And these tactics are systematically put in place so that these people are able to win. But they're consulted by marketing firms. So like even in the political space, say we want to push, you know, an agenda as far as social work to you know, uplift the voices of these vulnerable communities, you know, integrating with marketing companies or having someone with a marketing background who understands how to research, you know, different demographics, how to understand how they respond, will give us more power on the ground floor to interact and engage these populations to gain traction that we want for stuff like HR1, or these various different you know, policies that we're trying to get enacted.
Right.
There you go.
Let me just take a quick look at the chat here. We must be aggressive when it comes to community grassroots organizing. We must meet people and voters where they are.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. He knew exactly how to pick a target market for the most gain for his agenda. Yes, Clara. Yeah. This is what happened during Reconstruction. We need to find a way to get to the masses to want change and get people to want change is the hardest thing to achieve on a massive scale. Yes, Roderick. So it looks social workers see and understand the big picture, the stakeholders and the power dynamics versus politicians who often have a single focus. Let me see here.
Just to add to what Jill was saying, is we're taught to look at things through a systems perspective, right? And we talked about that a little bit yesterday. And I think that's kind of what you're coming at, where you're coming at it from, Jill. But we're taught to look at things how politics influence the people that we know and we work with at an individual psychological level, but then also how these social movements and political systems are influencing communities as a whole too. So thanks for bringing that up, Joel.
Yeah.
Yes, and we're coming up like on the last 5 minutes of our panel here, but we actually have a question for you, Roderick, and that is, what made you decide to pursue the MSW? And I'm very interested in this as well.
Absolutely.
It seemed like you were in marketing for, you said 8 years, right?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that. What drove that for you?
Growing up, I grew up in a pretty rural area, Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Okay.
And just kind of seeing the land, it was really hard to see myself in different kinds of spaces. So when I went to school, it was, okay, chemistry, you know, I understand chemistry pretty well. Got there, didn't really care for it. Then I went into marketing as a career. And mainly this is because I didn't have anybody that understood where I stood. And where my story is, I stand in a duality. Throughout school, I lived in the hood, like, you know, a very rural place. But I never really connected with my environment because I've always had these big dreams of, you know, getting outside of Fayetteville and doing all these different types of things. But I still obtained the behaviors of the people around me. So when I went to school, I was too smart for the hood kids, too hood for the smart kids. So I really never had someone to kind of identify with to lead me through. And of course, as always, you know, when you don't have that kind of direction, you make mistakes. And you know, and like everyone else, I did. But what led me to social work is understanding that if I had that insight, if I had someone who understood where I am and where I sit in life, in that dichotomy that I lived in, that I would be able to, I would have matriculated through life a little bit differently. And then I started understanding the power of perception and therapy and integrating on the ground floor. And it just made more sense that my passion was for people, not things. So when I was in these various different jobs, I was always really good with my clients, and I'm still really good with my clients, still really good at what I do, but my passion is for the people. And that's kind of how I integrate, move towards social work. And for me, it's a very diverse career field where I can go in and still integrate my background with marketing and research, but then also be fighting social justice issues that sit at the heart of who I am.
That matter to you most, right? And can you tell us a little bit? I don't know if you know yet. What are your plans for the future as a social worker?
I'll plan actually. I'm looking at Columbia's PhD program.
Oh, awesome!
I'm a first year candidate. Finishing up my first year. So down here in North Carolina. Well, I'm actually in Chicago now, but North Carolina. And after that, hopefully, some kind of opportunity to pursue my PhD full time. I really want to give my heart and soul to this field. Like, and I love it so much because, again, it's macro, it's micro, it's meso, it's me, it's my community, it's the whole entire nation that impacts everything that everybody else is. And I feel like I have a good enough heart and a good enough intention, and I'm smart enough to help make some right decisions for these various vulnerable populations.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. You've left me inspired, Roderick.
Thank you so much.
And we'll definitely connect soon. I wish you the best of luck on all of your future endeavors, and thank you so much for joining us up here.
Absolutely. Everybody else too. Thank you, guys. Thank you,
Taylor. Yes, enjoy the rest of Student Advocacy Day.
Oh, well, thank you.
And so we really only have like 2 minutes left here, but before Notion comes back up. But I just want to take note of the chat briefly. And Kelsey says, I think we need to be careful too, creating this notion that social workers can come in and save us all. That part. There are already dozens of organizers, specifically Black, Indigenous, people of color organizers, who are working in their community to do these things. Absolutely. We must uplift the work that these community members are already doing and use our education and privilege to make the current electeds and open positions more accessible. I could not agree with you more, Kelsey. I cannot agree with you more. Because definitely we need to be collaborating. We are not coming in to save everybody. We're absolutely not. And there are definitely pioneers doing amazing work right now. So we should be, joining hands with them and collaborating with them. That's extremely important. And so policy brings together all facets of social work. Well said. Best of luck to you, future doctor. Kelsey, I agree. And that's where advocacy and empowerment we are taught as social workers comes in. We do not have to take the lead. However, we can play to our strengths and be one of those people who are in the fight and help these grassroots people who want it. Yes, the ultimate goal to being a social worker is to do it until we are no longer needed. I agree that we are not here to save anyone. Well, thank you so much for awesome conversation today, everyone. I was a little worried because, I thought I was going to be talking to myself. This platform doesn't let me see all of your beautiful faces and hear you all, but I just want to thank you all, for joining us today for this session. Taylor, thank you as always. It's always a pleasure having you. Notion, thanks for giving us this space to just engage with everyone in the chat. And I just want to thank you all, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of Student Advocacy Day. And Notion did put the video in the chat of our conversation yesterday of can social workers help save democracy with social work students and young professionals across the country. So thank you so much.
Taylor, do you want to say anything?
Thank you all for having me, and just thank you especially to everyone who contributed to the conversation. The chat has been amazing. I wish, like Monica, I wish we could have had all of you up on this stage too. So thank you to everyone. It's been great.
Thank you so much, Monica and Taylor. And shout out to all the students, Max, Morgan, Roderick, Selena. Like, shout out to you for joining us as well. And I had so many, like, I just wanted to keep putting in the chat, like, yes, valid. And I had to stop myself. But so many of the points were made. And I was just like, this is such a riveting discussion. And I'm so glad, Monica and Taylor, that you were able to lead this and facilitate a discussion as well. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And by the way, these two are amazing student members on our leadership committee too, and they played a huge role in setting this up together. So I just want to recognize the efforts you put in as well.
Thank you, Notion.
Thank you. And then soon we will be beginning our session with Justin Hodge, who I think many of you have met on the private sessions. And then he will be coming to speak on the stage in a bit as well, exploring what does a political social work career look like. And I think many of us, when registering, we asked you that question, would you ever consider a career in political social work? So we just wanted to open up a space to have someone who's had experience in this talk about his experience as well. So give us a few minutes and we'll set that up, and then we'll be right back. And also at 3, if you are interested in actually meeting another social worker who's running for office, Trisha Shimamura and her team will actually be in the expo section to your left, and she will be live from 3 to 4 to meet with any social work students, talk about her experience running, and things like that. So we have 2 really amazing sessions going on right now on the main stage and then at the expo as well. So I encourage you to check out both, and we'll be back in a minute.